Janice who got him involved in Little Theatre, because she was in charge of their makeup department for a play. So he thought it was something they could do together, something to share. But he soon discovered she had no interest in the play the Little Theatre was performing, but had gotten suckered into doing makeup by the captain of her bowling team, Ed the plumber, who was also treasurer of Little Theatre, and who would be known to slay the ladies in town with the dashing characters he brought to the local stage. Fred went out to the first organizational meeting for the play with all intentions of helping with the set or the lights or performing a similar innocuous task where he would be far from the spotlight. That was not quite the way things worked out. It turned out that the Haleybury Little Theatre was an extremely small group of dedicated townsfolk. And if you came out to the first organizational meeting and could speak English, and there were more than 4 characters in the play under consideration, you were pretty well assured an on-stage part. In this case, the local acting troupe had chosen a particularly ambitious project, deciding to perform a version of Antony and Cleopatra, complete with period costumes and a battle scene pitting one of the Roman legions against a Nubian host. So it was indeed assured that everyone would be required on stage. Even though Fred tried to make himself invisible during the casting calls, he found himself assigned to play half of the Nubian host, with Bert Burble, who ran the town's license bureau, as the other half, and a eunuch in Cleopatra's bedchambers, which was where a good part of the play was set. Neither was a speaking part, and he was thankful for that small mercy. In addition, he was assigned to help construct the set. Janice was cast as a slave girl. He couldn't help but notice that as the casting calls went out, and Ed the plumber got the part of Mark Antony, and Bill the butcher got the part of Julius Caesar, and the other parts were assigned, that no call went out for a Cleopatra. Haven't they forgotten to cast Cleopatra? Fred asked Bert Burble, who was standing beside him, with the two of them representing the might of the Nubian host. Oh no, Bert answered confidently. Well, I haven't heard them call out anybody, Fred remarked. Oh, they don't have to, Bert answered. The part's taken. By who? Fred asked. And just at that moment, the door of the theater opened, and in walked perhaps the most ravishing creature Fred had ever laid eyes on. Dressed casually, jeans and a sweatshirt, auburn hair swept back in a haphazard way, no sign of makeup, but perfection in every feature. Fred stared. He gulped. She was a vision. Esmeralda, Bert Burble was saying. What's that? Fred managed, mentally pinching himself, trying to snap himself out of it. He looked away from the goddess, returning his attention to Bert. Esmeralda Bolton, Bert said. She always gets the lead role now that she's back in town. She got her start right here in Haleybury, and she was a special talent even when she was a kid. She's taken special courses on acting. She had to go away to the city for quite a while. He even made some kind of TV commercial and had a part on a TV show, or so I heard. Most everybody around here thought she was on her way. That's what they all said. Wow, Fred said. She's an attractive lady. He regarded her again, admired her from across the room. What's she doing playing Cleopatra here? Fred asked. Her mother's getting up in years. And the story is that Esmeralda came back to spend some time with her, Bert said. But that was a year or so ago. Everybody kind of figured she'd only stay here for a bit because there wasn't anything here for her. But she sort of settled back into the community, even though she doesn't seem to get out very much, except for doing 2 plays with us every year and volunteering at the nursing home where her mother is. Interesting, Fred said. And he was indeed thinking that perhaps this little theater experience was going to be somewhat more interesting than it had originally promised. rehearsals got underway, and Merle, the town undertaker, but also the producer and director of this production, put the actors through their paces. It was reasonably boring for Fred at first, because all they did was read lines over and over and over, and he had no lines. So he drank gallons of coffee and discussed Nubian battle strategy with Bert Burble to fill the time until they were ready to hit the stage. And even when that finally happened, and they did their first run-through in position, it remained reasonably boring for Fred. The battle scene turned out to be about 30 seconds long, and he and Bert were quickly vanquished by the victorious Mark Antony and the rest of the Roman legion, which consisted of Eric, who was a stock boy at the local grocery store, and Tom Haskell, whose wife had run off with an insurance man and left poor Tom alone with 3 small children. And then there was his part as a eunuch, which was not really a very involved part either. He basically stood around for most of the time, except for one tiny moment. That was when he got to serve wine to Antony and Cleopatra as they reclined in their bedchambers, discussing the overthrow of the Roman Empire. It was his one big scene. But there was something else that Fred did during rehearsals. That was to watch the leading lady, Esmeralda Bolton. She had amazing stage presence. The first time she did her big monologue at the end of the play, just before she gets bit by the snake and dies. You could have heard a pin drop. She got a standing ovation from the cast and crew. It was a truly moving experience. It was easy to see that she was a big city actress, while the rest of the cast, even the dashing Ed, were really small town hicks playing and acting. Fred was mesmerized by her. He found her beautiful beyond description and had to be careful not to be caught staring at her. But even though Esmeralda seemed to mix freely with the rest of the cast and crew during rehearsals, Fred observed that she said little when she wasn't in character. She usually arrived just as they were getting going, never early enough for a chat. She was gone the moment the final line was uttered. She was clearly not interested in socializing. And this disappointed Fred because he ached to know her better. He became obsessed with Esmeralda. She haunted his dreams, was with him during his waking hours, and he can even have sworn he saw her through the lens of his camera one night as he was photographing the Pythian sisters for the newspaper. It was scary. Fred suffered what might be considered a major setback early on in rehearsals. Merle decided the scene where Mark Antony vanquishes the Nubians was too violent for family theater, so he unceremoniously cut it. With that one directorial stroke, Fred was reduced to being nothing more than a eunuch. It was an unsettling moment for a novice thespian, but he resolved not to let it dampen his enthusiasm for what had become an interesting experience. To throw himself into the eunuch part, happy to be part of the show in any capacity, however small.